Racist flight attendant kicks elderly black couple out of first class, but their adopted daughter's bold move shocked the airline. Grandma, are you sure you know where you're going? Economy is that way. Those are the condescending, racist words that flight attendant Amanda Lopez spoke to 70-year-old Margaret Johnson as she slowly made her way down the airplane aisle, pointing dismissively towards the back of the plane with a smirk that said everything about her assumptions. But Amanda wasn't finished with her humiliation campaign. "These people don't know where they belong sometimes," Amanda continued, her voice dripping with superiority as she spoke loudly enough for other passengers to hear, making sure everyone witnessed her power play against the elderly black couple. But when Amanda made her next comment, questioning whether the couple had showered before boarding because there's a smell, their 14-year-old adopted daughter, Sophia, had heard enough. What happened next would end Amanda's career, expose airline racism to millions of viewers worldwide, and prove that sometimes the most powerful advocates come in the smallest packages. Welcome back to Black and Bruised Stories. If you're new here, you've just joined a community dedicated to truth, justice, and survival. Show some love by clicking the like and subscribe button. Before we dive deeper into this story, drop a comment where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. 73-year-old Robert Johnson, a retired school principal who helped integrate Atlanta schools during the civil rights movement, being treated like he doesn't belong in the airplane he paid to board. His wife, Margaret, a special education teacher who dedicated 40 years to helping disabled children, being called grandma by someone young enough to be her granddaughter, and being told she doesn't know where she belongs, and their 14-year-old black adopted daughter, Sophia, watching the two people who saved her from foster care being systematically humiliated because of their age and race. But here's what Amanda Lopez didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have imagined as she made one racist comment after another. This wasn't just any elderly couple. This wasn't just any 14-year-old girl. This was a family with a legacy of fighting discrimination, a child who had learned advocacy from masters of civil rights, and a story that would expose the ugly truth about ageism and racism in airline travel while going viral across every social media platform. The moment Amanda said, "These people don't know where they belong," sometimes she sealed her fate, because Sophia Johnson was about to show her exactly where racist flight attendants belong, unemployed and facing the consequences of their discriminatory behavior. Let me take you back to Atlanta, Georgia, where this incredible story begins. Robert and Margaret Johnson weren't just any retired educators. They were pioneers who spent their entire careers breaking down barriers in segregated school systems. Robert served as principal at Lincoln High School during the most turbulent years of integration when angry mobs gathered outside schools and federal marshals escorted black children to class. He didn't just survive those years, he thrived, becoming a mentor to countless students who went on to break barriers of their own. Margaret's story is equally remarkable. As a special education teacher in the 1970s and 80s, she worked with children that other educators had given up on. She developed teaching methods that are still used today, created programs that transformed lives, and never missed a single day of work in 4 decades of service. Together, Robert and Margaret built a legacy of education, advocacy, and unwavering commitment to justice. But their greatest act of love came 4 years ago, when they were already in their late 60s. Sophia was 10 years old, cycling through her 5th foster placement, labeled as a problem child with behavioral challenges stemming from early trauma. Most families wouldn't consider adopting a troubled 10-year-old, especially when they were approaching 70. But the Johnsons saw something in Sophia that others had missed. Not a broken child, but a brilliant young mind that needed stability, love, and the kind of patient guidance they had spent their careers providing. The adoption wasn't easy. The Johnsons' adult biological children were initially skeptical about their parents taking on such a huge responsibility at their age. Social workers questioned whether elderly adoptive parents could handle a child with Sophia's challenges. Community members whispered about the unusual family dynamic. A black elderly couple adopting a black child who wasn't related to them, creating an unconventional multi-generational household. But love has a way of conquering skepticism. Sophia, who had been defensive and withdrawn in previous placements, began to flourish under the Johnsons' patient care. She went from failing grades to honor roll, from behavioral problems to debate team leadership, from a child who didn't trust adults to a young advocate who would defend her family with the eloquence of a seasoned civil rights lawyer. The transformation was remarkable, but it didn't happen overnight. Robert spent hours helping Sophia with homework, teaching her about the civil rights movement, sharing stories of overcoming discrimination through education and dignity. Margaret worked with her on emotional regulation, using the same techniques she had developed for special needs students to help Sophia process her early trauma. They attended family therapy together, navigated challenges as a team, and built unbreakable bonds of trust and love. Sophia learned more than just academic subjects from her adoptive grandparents. She learned about resilience from Robert's stories of facing angry segregationists while maintaining his commitment to education. She learned about compassion from Margaret's accounts of never giving up on a single student, no matter how challenging their disabilities. She learned about dignity under pressure, about responding to hatred with grace, and about the power of education to change hearts and minds. But she also learned about the ongoing reality of racism and discrimination. Despite all their achievements, despite their status as respected educators, the Johnsons still faced prejudice in their daily lives. Sophia witnessed store clerks following them suspiciously, restaurant servers treating them dismissively, and neighbors making assumptions about their income and education levels. These experiences taught Sophia to recognize discrimination when she saw it, and more importantly, to understand that silence in the face of injustice makes you complicit in perpetuating it. Now, 4 years later, the Johnsons faced their biggest challenge yet. Robert's memory had been slipping for months. Forgotten names, missed appointments, confusion about familiar places. After extensive testing with local doctors, they received a referral to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Maryland, home to some of the world's leading neurological specialists. The consultation would cost thousands of dollars, require complex travel arrangements, and potentially determine the trajectory of Robert's remaining years. Using their entire retirement savings, the Johnsons purchased 3 economy tickets on American Airlines Flight 892, departing Atlanta at 8 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Margaret's arthritis made the early departure particularly challenging, but the appointment couldn't be rescheduled. Sophia would serve as more than just a traveling companion. She had become the family's primary advocate, medical translator, and emotional support system during this frightening journey into the unknown. As they prepared for the trip, Sophia helped her grandparents organize medication schedules, medical records, and emergency contact information. She practiced pronouncing complex medical terms, researched Robert's condition online, and prepared questions for the specialists. At just 14 years old, she was carrying responsibilities that most adults would find overwhelming. But the Johnsons had taught her that family members support each other through every challenge life brings. The morning of departure arrived with typical Atlanta humidity and the nervous energy that comes with important medical journeys. Robert moved slowly, his cognitive decline making even familiar tasks more challenging. Margaret's arthritis was particularly painful that morning, requiring extra time and careful movements. Sophia double-checked their carry-on bags, ensuring they had enough medication for potential delays, snacks for Robert's blood sugar, and comfort items for the long flight ahead. None of them could have anticipated that their biggest challenge wouldn't be the medical consultation in Maryland, but the discrimination they would face from the moment they stepped onto their flight. Sophia had witnessed racism directed at her family before, but never with the captive audience of an airplane cabin, never with the power dynamics of airline authority, and never with the viral potential of social media documentation. As they approached the gate at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, Sophia noticed the tired faces of early morning travelers, the mix of business professionals and families that characterized this medical route to Maryland. She helped her grandparents navigate the boarding process, keeping track of their documents and ensuring they had everything needed for a smooth journey. But smooth was the last thing this journey would be. Flight attendant Amanda Lopez was about to learn that when you target the wrong family with your prejudice, when you underestimate the power of a child who has been raised by civil rights educators, and when you make the mistake of calling an elderly civil rights pioneer grandma while telling her she doesn't know where she belongs, the consequences can be swift, public, and career-ending. The stage was set for a confrontation that would be filmed by dozens of passengers, shared across every social media platform, picked up by national news outlets, and ultimately lead to policy changes across the entire airline industry. Sophia Johnson was about to show the world what happens when love, education, and righteous anger combine in defense of family dignity. If you're already shocked by Amanda's condescending treatment and want to see how Sophia destroys her with facts and eloquence, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed someone talk to elderly people this disrespectfully? What would you have done in this situation? The discrimination began the moment Robert Johnson's foot touched the airplane's threshold. Amanda Lopez, a 32-year-old flight attendant with 5 years of experience and unconscious biases she had never examined, took one look at the elderly black couple and immediately made assumptions that would destroy her career and expose the ugly reality of airline racism. Robert moved carefully down the narrow aisle, his 73-year-old body requiring deliberate steps to maintain balance. His recent cognitive decline made navigating unfamiliar spaces more challenging, and the airplane's cramped interior felt overwhelming. Margaret followed behind him, her arthritis making each movement painful, but her dignity intact despite the obvious discomfort. Sophia walked beside her grandmother, ready to offer assistance while carrying their shared carry-on bag. "Move it along! People are waiting!" Amanda called out impatiently, her voice carrying a tone that immediately made other passengers look up from their phones and magazines. There was something in her inflection, something beyond normal airline efficiency that suggested deeper problems brewing. Robert paused to pull out his reading glasses, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to focus on the boarding pass numbers. The combination of early morning departure, stress about the medical consultation, and his developing cognitive issues made this simple task more difficult than it should have been. Amanda's impatience was palpable as she watched him struggle with what she considered a basic requirement. "Sir, can you move faster? We have a schedule to keep." Amanda's voice rose above the ambient cabin noise, causing nearby passengers to turn and stare. The business traveler in seat 2A looked up from his laptop with annoyance. The elderly white couple in row 3 exchanged concerned glances. Dr. Sarah Kim, a physician traveling to a conference, began paying closer attention to the interaction unfolding before her. Margaret stepped forward to help her husband, her voice gentle but firm. "My husband has medical issues. Please be patient with him." Her words carried the authority of someone who had spent decades advocating for students with special needs, someone who understood that patience and understanding could make all the difference in challenging situations. But Amanda's response revealed the depth of her prejudice. She rolled her eyes dramatically, making sure other passengers could see her exaggerated frustration. Can you speak up and speak faster? We don't have all day." The disrespect in her tone was unmistakable, but it was about to get much worse. As the Johnsons continued moving toward their seats, Amanda made a comment that would later be captured on multiple cell phone recordings and shared millions of times across social media platforms. Speaking to her colleague, but loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, she said, "Did someone forget to shower before boarding? There's a smell." Sophia heard every word. At 14 years old, she had already witnessed enough racism to recognize it immediately. But this was different. This wasn't just ignorant assumptions or microaggressions. This was deliberate humiliation of the two people who had saved her life, given her love, and taught her everything she knew about dignity and justice. The racist stereotyping continued as the Johnsons reached their assigned seats in row 15. Amanda appeared beside them with an expression of suspicion and disbelief that would be documented by passengers' cameras from multiple angles. "Are you sure you're in the right section?" Amanda asked, examining their boarding passes with exaggerated scrutiny. "This isn't subsidized housing." The comment drew audible gasps from nearby passengers, but Amanda seemed emboldened rather than embarrassed by their reactions. Robert, confused by the aggressive questioning, turned to Margaret for clarification. His cognitive decline made it difficult for him to process why a simple seating arrangement had become confrontational. "Margaret, what's happening? Are we in the wrong place?" Amanda seized on his confusion as evidence of incompetence, rather than recognizing it as a sign of the medical condition they were traveling to address. "Is there a language barrier here?" she asked mockingly, her voice dripping with condescension. "Do you understand English clearly? Maybe someone else should handle your tickets." Sophia watched her grandfather's face crumple with confusion and embarrassment. This man, who had faced down segregationists, who had integrated schools despite death threats, who had spent his life fighting for dignity and education, was being treated like an incompetent child by someone young enough to be his granddaughter. The systematic discrimination escalated when Margaret requested an aisle seat accommodation for her arthritis. As someone who had worked with disabled students for 40 years, she understood her rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act and made her request politely and professionally. Special needs require advanced notice and proper documentation. Amanda responded dismissively, despite the fact that the ADA specifically allows for last-minute reasonable accommodations. "We can't make exceptions for every passenger who claims medical issues." Sophia stepped forward to advocate for her grandmother, her voice clear and articulate despite her young age. "My grandmother has arthritis and diabetes. She needs access for medical reasons." Her words carried the confidence of someone who had been trained by expert educators. But Amanda's response revealed the depth of her bias against the entire family. "Little girl, adults are talking here," Amanda snapped, dismissing Sophia's advocacy with a wave of her hand. "Children shouldn't interfere with airline operations and customer service procedures." The bathroom incident pushed the discrimination into territory that even passive passengers couldn't ignore. Margaret's medication schedule required regular bathroom access, and her mobility challenges made timing crucial. When she politely requested assistance navigating to the narrow airplane restroom, Amanda's response was both cruel and medically dangerous. "You'll have to wait until we're airborne and I'm available," Amanda declared, blocking the aisle with her body. "We can't have passengers wandering around during boarding procedures." When Sophia offered to help her grandmother, Amanda's response became even more problematic. "Children can't assist with adult personal care. That's inappropriate and against airline safety regulations." Margaret's obvious discomfort and embarrassment grew as the situation escalated. Here was a woman who had dedicated her life to helping others maintain dignity despite their challenges, being denied basic human needs because of Amanda's prejudice and power trip. Sophia watched her grandmother's face flush with shame and frustration, and her anger reached a boiling point that would soon explode into action. Other passengers were beginning to document the obvious discrimination unfolding before their eyes. Dr. Sarah Kim discreetly activated her phone's recording function, recognizing medical discrimination when she saw it. The business executive in row 12 began typing notes about what he was witnessing, his corporate training in diversity and inclusion making Amanda's behavior particularly disturbing. The young mother traveling with her 2 children covered their ears during Amanda's most inappropriate comments, trying to shield them from witnessing such blatant racism in action. But perhaps the most significant witness was William Carter, a 78-year-old white retired judge traveling with his wife, Patricia. The Carters had initially remained silent, uncomfortable with confrontation, but increasingly disturbed by what they were seeing. Judge Carter's decades on the bench had taught him to recognize discrimination, and Amanda's behavior was textbook racial bias combined with ageism. Amanda seemed to interpret the passenger's silence as approval for her behavior, emboldening her to make increasingly offensive comments. "Some people just don't know proper travel etiquette and airplane behavior," she announced to the cabin. "We have paying customers waiting while certain passengers figure out basic instructions." The phrase paying customers was particularly telling, since the Johnsons had used their entire retirement savings to purchase their tickets for this crucial medical journey. Amanda's assumption that they somehow didn't belong in the same category as other passengers revealed her prejudice in stark terms. Sophia's internal struggle was becoming unbearable. Everything her grandparents had taught her about responding to racism with dignity was warring with her protective instincts and righteous anger. She remembered Robert's stories about maintaining composure during school integration, even when faced with violent mobs. She recalled Margaret's lessons about responding to ignorance with education rather than anger. But she also remembered their teachings about standing up for justice, about never allowing evil to triumph through good people's silence. The breaking point came when Amanda made one final comment that would seal her fate and transform Sophia from passive observer to powerful advocate. As Robert struggled to understand Amanda's increasingly aggressive instructions, she turned to another crew member and said loudly, "Some passengers just require extra assistance that delays everyone else's travel experience. I don't know why they even attempt to fly when they clearly can't handle basic procedures." That was it. Sophia Johnson, 14-year-old adopted daughter, honor roll student, and future civil rights lawyer, rose from her middle seat with the kind of determination that comes from watching the people you love most being systematically humiliated. Her grandparents had spent their lives fighting discrimination with patience and education. Now it was her turn to fight with the weapons they had given her: truth, articulate speech, and the unshakable conviction that love always defeats hatred. The entire cabin was about to witness something remarkable. A child defending her family with the eloquence of a trained advocate, the passion of someone who had experienced both abandonment and salvation, and the fearless courage that comes from knowing you're fighting for something bigger than yourself. Amanda Lopez had no idea that her career was about to end, that her discriminatory behavior was about to be exposed to millions of people worldwide, and that the quiet 14-year-old girl she had dismissed was about to deliver a verbal devastation so complete and so powerful that it would change airline policies across the entire industry. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, because Sophia's response to this racist treatment is about to be legendary, and you won't want to miss a single word. Tell me in the comments, how would you have handled watching elderly passengers being treated this way? Should other passengers have spoken up sooner? Sophia Johnson rose from her seat with the kind of quiet determination that comes from watching injustice for too long. At 14 years old, she had already learned more about discrimination than most adults ever would. But this moment was different. This wasn't about abstract lessons in civil rights history. This was about defending the two people who had saved her life, given her a family, and taught her that love can triumph over hatred when good people have the courage to act. "Excuse me." Sophia's voice cut through the cabin noise with startling clarity and authority. Every passenger within hearing distance turned to look at this young girl, who was clearly about to say something important. "I will not let you humiliate my parents any further." Amanda Lopez spun around, her face registering genuine shock at being challenged by someone she had dismissed as irrelevant to the adult conversation happening around her. The surprise in her expression was captured by multiple passengers' phones, creating footage that would later go viral across every social media platform. "Your parents," Amanda stammered, clearly confused by the family dynamics she was witnessing. "But and they're so old." Her inability to complete coherent sentences revealed how thoroughly Sophia's intervention had disrupted her assumed authority and prejudiced worldview. Sophia's response would later be studied in communications classes, cited in civil rights training programs, and shared millions of times as an example of how powerful truth-telling can be when delivered with conviction and love. "They are my parents," Sophia declared, her voice gaining strength with each word. "They're my adoptive parents, and you are being racist, ageist, and completely discriminatory." The cabin fell silent as passengers realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. A child advocating for her family with the skill of a trained lawyer and the passion of someone fighting for everything she held dear. Sophia's defense of her family's legacy was both educational and devastating in its precision. "My grandfather was a principal who helped integrate Atlanta schools in the 1960s when angry mobs gathered outside and federal marshals had to escort black children to class. He didn't just survive those years. He thrived, becoming a mentor to countless students who went on to break barriers of their own." Amanda's face was growing paler as Sophia continued, her voice never wavering despite the emotional weight of what she was sharing. "My grandmother taught special education children for 40 years, without missing a single day. She worked with children that other educators had given up on, developed teaching methods that are still used today, and created programs that transformed lives." The passengers were transfixed. Dr. Sarah Kim had tears in her eyes as she recorded Sophia's defense. Judge Carter was nodding with approval, recognizing the kind of systematic advocacy he had heard in his courtroom from the most skilled civil rights attorneys. The young mother was explaining to her children that they were witnessing something historic, a moment when someone stood up for what was right, despite being vastly outnumbered and outpowered. But Sophia wasn't finished. Her next words would expose the personal cost of Amanda's discrimination in terms that even the most heartless observer couldn't ignore. "They adopted me when I had nowhere stable to go and needed a loving family," Sophia continued, her voice breaking slightly before regaining its strength. "I was 10 years old, cycling through foster placements, labeled as a problem child with behavioral issues. Most families wouldn't consider adopting a troubled 10-year-old, especially when they were approaching 70 years old." The cabin was completely silent now. Even the ambient airplane noise seemed muted as Sophia shared the most intimate details of her family's formation. "But the Johnsons saw something in me that others had missed. Not a broken child, but a brilliant young mind that needed stability, love, and the kind of patient guidance they had spent their careers providing to thousands of students." Amanda was beginning to understand the magnitude of her mistake. But Sophia's systematic dismantling of her discriminatory behavior was far from over. "You made comments about them smelling. That's racist stereotyping and completely inappropriate," Sophia said, her voice taking on the tone of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. "You rushed them because of their age and race, not because of actual airline policy violations. You questioned the legitimacy of their tickets based on assumptions about their income level and demographic background." Each accusation was accompanied by specific examples that passengers had witnessed, creating an undeniable record of systematic discrimination. You denied my grandmother's medical accommodation requests without proper consideration, despite the fact that she clearly stated her arthritis and diabetes require access for bathroom and medication needs. The medical aspect of Sophia's defense resonated particularly strongly with Dr. Kim, who stepped forward to add her professional voice to the growing chorus of passenger support. "I'm a physician," Dr. Kim announced, "and what I've witnessed is clear medical discrimination against elderly patients with legitimate accommodation needs." Sophia's explanation of their medical journey transformed the entire narrative from a simple customer service dispute to a story about family love, medical necessity, and the courage required to seek treatment despite discrimination. "We're traveling to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Maryland for my grandfather's specialized neurological consultation," Sophia explained, her voice carrying the weight of medical complexity and family fear. "My grandfather has early-stage cognitive decline that requires evaluation by world-renowned specialists. We used our entire retirement savings for this crucial medical journey because local doctors couldn't provide the level of care he needs." The revelation that Robert's slower speech and occasional confusion were symptoms of a medical condition seeking treatment rather than evidence of incompetence made Amanda's mocking even more cruel and inexcusable. Passengers who had initially been merely uncomfortable with the interaction were now openly expressing disgust at what they had witnessed. Sophia's description of her role as primary caregiver and medical advocate revealed the remarkable maturity and responsibility she carried at just 14 years old. "My grandmother's diabetes complications make travel already challenging without added harassment and stress. I serve as their advocate and translator during medical appointments because I've learned to navigate complex healthcare systems that aren't always patient with elderly patients who need extra time and consideration." The business executive in row 12 stood up to address Amanda directly. "Miss, this is completely unacceptable customer service treatment of passengers who clearly have legitimate medical needs and have paid for their tickets like everyone else." A military veteran traveling in row 8 added his voice to the growing coalition supporting the Johnson family. "Ma'am, these people deserve the same respect as any passenger on this aircraft, regardless of their age, race, or medical conditions." But it was Sophia's sharing of her adoption story that truly transformed the cabin's atmosphere from uncomfortable tension to protective solidarity. The Johnsons made a decision to adopt me despite their age and community skepticism about elderly adoptive parents. We spent 4 years building trust, love, and unbreakable family bonds that made me who I am today. Sophia's voice grew stronger as she described her transformation from a troubled foster child to an honor roll student and debate team member. "I went from failing grades to academic excellence, from behavioral problems to leadership positions, from a child who didn't trust adults to someone who would defend her family with everything she had learned about justice and advocacy." The emotional climax of Sophia's defense came when she connected her family's personal story to the larger struggle against systematic discrimination. "They taught me about resilience through their stories of facing segregation while maintaining their commitment to education. They taught me about compassion through their accounts of never giving up on any student, no matter how challenging their disabilities or circumstances." Sophia's final accusation against Amanda carried the weight of historical knowledge and personal experience. "They taught me about dignity under pressure, about responding to hatred with grace, and about the power of education to change hearts and minds. But they also taught me that silence in the face of injustice makes you complicit in perpetuating it." The 14-year-old's systematic dismantling of Amanda's discriminatory behavior was captured from multiple angles by passengers who recognized they were witnessing something remarkable. The footage would later be analyzed by legal experts, civil rights organizations, and communications professionals as an example of how powerful advocacy can emerge from the most unexpected sources. Amanda's attempts at defensive responses only made her situation worse. "I was just following standard airline procedures for all passengers equally," she insisted. But Sophia was ready with specific counterexamples of bias and unprofessional behavior. "You never asked other passengers about showering or smelling," Sophia responded immediately. "You never questioned other passengers' ticket legitimacy or ability to understand English. You never denied other passengers' medical accommodation requests or mocked their speech patterns." The systematic nature of Sophia's documentation revealed preparation and intelligence that impressed even the most skeptical passengers. This wasn't an emotional outburst from an upset child. This was methodical advocacy from someone who had been trained by master educators and civil rights pioneers. As Sophia concluded her defense, the entire cabin had been transformed from a collection of individual travelers into a community united in support of justice and human dignity. Her words had not only exposed Amanda's discrimination, but educated every witness about the ongoing reality of racism, ageism, and the extraordinary power of family love to overcome systematic oppression. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will show you the power of community solidarity, and you need to see how the entire airplane rallies around this incredible family. Tell me in the comments, have you ever seen a child advocate this powerfully for their family? What impressed you most about Sophia's defense? The transformation of American Airlines Flight 892 from a routine departure to a viral civil rights moment was immediate and unprecedented. Sophia Johnson's powerful defense of her grandparents had awakened something in the cabin. A recognition that they were all witnesses to systematic discrimination and had a choice to make about whether they would remain silent or stand up for justice. Dr. Sarah Kim was the first to take action beyond recording the incident. Rising from her seat in row 6, she addressed the cabin with the authority of someone whose medical training had taught her to recognize and respond to emergencies, including the emergency of human dignity under attack. "I am a physician," Dr. Kim announced, her voice carrying across the cabin. "And what I have witnessed today is clear medical discrimination against elderly patients with legitimate healthcare needs." Her professional testimony transformed the incident from a customer service dispute into a documented case of disability rights violations. Dr. Kim's intervention was particularly powerful because it provided independent professional validation of Sophia's advocacy. This family is traveling for specialized neurological consultation at one of the nation's leading medical centers. The cognitive symptoms and mobility challenges that have been mocked and dismissed are precisely the medical conditions they are seeking treatment for. William Carter, the 78-year-old retired federal judge, stood slowly from his seat in row 3, his wife Patricia supporting his arm as he addressed the cabin with decades of legal authority behind his words. "In my 45 years on the federal bench, I have seen systematic discrimination take many forms, but what we have witnessed today is textbook racial bias combined with ageism directed against American citizens who have every right to travel with dignity." Judge Carter's legal perspective added another layer of credibility to Sophia's accusations. This young lady has documented specific instances of disparate treatment based on race and age that would constitute actionable discrimination under federal civil rights statutes. The business executive from row 12, Michael Chen, stepped forward with his phone displaying the contact information for his law firm's civil rights division. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, my company's legal team specializes in discrimination cases, and we would be honored to provide witness testimony and legal support if you choose to pursue action against this airline." The young mother traveling with her 2 children used the moment as a teaching opportunity, explaining to her kids in a voice loud enough for other passengers to hear. "Children, This is what it looks like when someone stands up against discrimination and injustice. Sophia is showing us how to defend people we love when others treat them unfairly. Her children's innocent questions. Mommy, why was the flight attendant being mean to the grandparents? And is it bad to be old and black? Cut through any remaining passenger ambivalence about what they had witnessed. Out of the mouths of babes came the simple truth that Amanda's behavior was obviously wrong to anyone with an unprejudiced perspective. The military veteran from Row 8, Sergeant First Class Marcus Wright, added his voice with the kind of moral clarity that comes from serving a country founded on principles of equality. "Ma'am," he addressed Amanda directly, "I've served 3 tours overseas, defending the rights that you are violating right here on this aircraft. These passengers deserve better, and this family deserves an apology." But Amanda's defensive responses only made her situation worse and revealed the depth of her unconscious bias. "I was just following standard airline procedures for all passengers equally," she insisted, but the passengers had witnessed enough to know better. Sophia, demonstrating the systematic thinking her grandparents had taught her, was ready with specific counterexamples. "You never questioned other passengers about their ability to afford their seats. You never made comments about other passengers' hygiene or smelling. You never denied other passengers' medical accommodation requests based on lack of advanced notice." The elderly white couple from Row 3, Patricia and William Carter, felt compelled to add their witness testimony. "We've been traveling for 50 years, Patricia said, "and we have never seen airline staff treat passengers with such obvious disrespect and bias. This behavior is unacceptable." The viral moment was being captured from multiple angles by passengers who recognized they were documenting something historically significant. The hashtags Jan Afurg airline racism and Oud elderly discrimination began trending nationally within minutes as passengers shared footage across social media platforms. Dr. Kim, understanding the medical implications of stress on elderly patients with chronic conditions, made the situation even more serious. The stress being imposed on these passengers could exacerbate Mr. Johnson's neurological condition and Mrs. Johnson's diabetes. This discrimination is not just morally wrong, it's medically dangerous. The social media explosion was immediate and overwhelming. Videos of Sophia's articulate defense were shared hundreds of thousands of times within the first hour. Major news outlets began picking up the story of a 14-year-old fighting ageism and racism at 30,000 Hontefuit celebrity passengers and influencers amplified the story for broader reach. Or Adopted Daughter Defends and Sophia Defends Family went viral across all social platforms as people shared their own stories of family loyalty, adoption success, and standing up to discrimination. The story resonated particularly strongly with adoption communities, civil rights organizations, and medical patient advocacy groups. The impact reached beyond social media into corporate boardrooms. American Airlines' stock price began fluctuating as the story gained national media attention. Their PR department scrambled to respond to thousands of complaints and boycott threats flooding their customer service systems. But the most devastating moment for Amanda came when Flight Supervisor Brian Miller arrived after being summoned by multiple passenger complaints and social media alerts that had reached airline corporate headquarters in real time. Supervisor Miller began reviewing cell phone footage and security camera recordings of the boarding interactions, his face growing more serious with each piece of evidence. Sophia's systematic documentation of discriminatory behavior had created an undeniable record that would be impossible for the airline to dismiss or minimize. "Mutz. Lopez," Supervisor Miller said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who understood the legal and public relations nightmare unfolding. "I need you to step aside while we review multiple allegations of discriminatory conduct and policy violations." Other crew members began distancing themselves from Amanda's behavior, with several stepping forward to support the passenger complaints. Flight attendant Lisa Patel approached the Johnson family to offer personal apologies for her colleagues' conduct. The corporate damage control was swift and comprehensive. American Airlines' legal department was assessing potential liability and lawsuit exposure, while executive leadership monitored the situation for required intervention and policy changes. The viral nature of the incident meant that their response would be scrutinized by millions of people and could set precedents for how airlines handled discrimination complaints. Sophia's impact extended beyond this single incident. Foster care advocacy groups began sharing her story as an example of successful adoption and family loyalty. Educational institutions started reaching out to invite her to speak about advocacy and civil rights. Legal organizations recognized her natural talent for systematic documentation and articulate presentation of evidence. The passengers had created an impromptu support network, exchanging contact information for ongoing assistance and follow-up testimony. A group chat was established to coordinate support for the Johnson family and ensure that justice was served beyond just this immediate incident. Children throughout the cabin were asking their parents about adoption, racism, and the importance of standing up for others, creating teachable moments that would ripple through families long after the flight ended. Sophia's courage had inspired not just adults, but other young people to recognize their own power to fight injustice. But perhaps the most significant transformation was within the Johnson family itself. Robert and Margaret had spent their careers fighting discrimination through patience and education, but they had never experienced such immediate and powerful support from a community of strangers united by their adopted granddaughter's advocacy. Sophia had not only defended her family, she had educated an entire airplane full of people about the ongoing reality of racism and ageism, while demonstrating the extraordinary power of family love to overcome systematic oppression. Her intervention had transformed what could have been a traumatic experience into a moment of triumph and community solidarity. Make sure you're subscribed, because the corporate response and long-term consequences are about to be revealed, and you won't believe how many policies change because of Sophia's courage. Tell me in the comments which passengers' support meant the most to you. How do you think airlines should handle discrimination complaints? The consequences of Sophia Johnson's powerful defense began unfolding immediately, creating a cascade of accountability and systemic change that would transform airline policies nationwide. What started as one family's medical journey had become a watershed moment in civil rights advocacy and corporate responsibility. Flight Supervisor Brian Miller's response was swift and decisive. Ms. Lopez, you are suspended immediately pending a full investigation of discriminatory behavior patterns and multiple policy violations. He announced his words carrying the weight of corporate legal necessity and moral obligation. Amanda's face drained of color as she realized her career was over, ended by the articulate testimony of a 14-year-old who had refused to let injustice go unchallenged. But the airline's response went far beyond disciplinary action against one employee. Within minutes of Supervisor Miller's arrival, an American Airlines corporate representative joined the conversation via phone, recognizing that this incident had already gone viral and required immediate executive-level intervention. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, this is Lisa Rodriguez, Vice President of Customer Relations for American Airlines. The voice came through the supervisor's phone on the speaker for the entire cabin to hear. I want to personally apologize for the unacceptable treatment you have received from our staff. This behavior violates every principle of respect and dignity that our company claims to represent. The corporate response was unprecedented in its immediacy and scope. Effective immediately, We are implementing a comprehensive review of all customer service policies regarding treatment of elderly, disabled, and minority passengers. Your granddaughter's advocacy has exposed systematic failures in our training and oversight that must be addressed. Sophia, still standing protectively beside her grandparents, wasn't satisfied with corporate apologies alone. What specific changes will you make to ensure this never happens to another family? She asked her question, revealing the kind of systematic thinking that impressed legal experts and civil rights advocates who would later analyze this moment. The corporate representative's answer would become a template for airline industry reform. We are immediately mandating enhanced sensitivity training for all flight and ground staff, focusing specifically on unconscious bias, medical accommodation requirements, and respectful treatment of elderly passengers. Additionally, we're establishing an independent oversight committee to review discrimination complaints. Dr. Sarah Kim stepped forward to add medical expertise to the policy discussion. Any airline staff member who denies legitimate medical accommodations or mocks passengers' medical conditions should face immediate suspension and retraining. What we witnessed today could have seriously endangered Mr. Johnson's health. Judge Carter contributed a legal perspective that would later influence federal transportation policy. The systematic nature of this discrimination suggests the need for industry-wide reform, not just company-specific changes. The Department of Transportation should investigate patterns of bias across all major airlines. But the most powerful moment came when the entire economy section erupted in spontaneous applause for Sophia's courage in defending her adoptive family. Passengers stood, many with tears in their eyes, recognizing that they had witnessed something extraordinary, a child transforming trauma into triumph through articulate advocacy and unwavering family loyalty. The business executive Michael Chen presented his card to Sophia personally. "Young lady, when you're ready to pursue legal studies, our firm would be honored to offer you an internship. You have natural advocacy skills that most lawyers spend years trying to develop." Military veteran Sergeant Wright added his voice to the chorus of support. "Sophia, you've shown more courage at 14 years old than most adults demonstrate in their entire lives. Your grandparents should be incredibly proud of the advocate they've raised. The immediate upgrades offered by American Airlines first-class accommodations for the remainder of their journey were politely declined by the Johnson family. We earned our seats through honest savings and medical necessity," Margaret said with quiet dignity. "We don't need charity, we need respect." This response demonstrated the kind of principled dignity that had defined the Johnsons' entire approach to civil rights advocacy, and would become another viral moment showing how to demand justice without accepting condescending gestures. The social media impact continued exploding throughout the flight. Sophia Defense family reached over 2 million shares within 3 hours, with celebrities, politicians, and civil rights leaders amplifying the story. Adoption agencies reported increased interest in older child placements. Inspired by the Johnson family's success story, medical advocacy groups used Sophia's intervention as a case study for patient rights and family advocacy training. Her systematic documentation and articulate presentation became teaching materials for law schools and civil rights organizations across the country. The long-term systemic changes began implementing before the flight even landed in Maryland. American Airlines announced a complete overhaul of their customer service training, with mandatory bias testing and ongoing education requirements for all staff members. Federal Transportation Department officials announced investigations into discrimination patterns across the airline industry, using the Johnson incident as a catalyst for broader reform. Congressional hearings were scheduled to address elderly and minority passenger rights protection. But the most meaningful transformation was within the Johnson family itself. Sophia's confidence and advocacy skills had been tested under the most challenging circumstances and proven unshakable. Her grandparents' pride in her courage was evident in their tearful embraces and whispered words of gratitude. Robert's medical consultation at Johns Hopkins Hospital was successful, with specialists developing a comprehensive treatment plan that would help manage his cognitive decline while maintaining his dignity and independence. Sophia's role as medical advocate proved invaluable during complex appointments where her systematic thinking and clear communication facilitated better care. Margaret's diabetes management improved through the specialized care coordination that Sophia helped navigate. The stress reduction from having such a capable advocate actually improved both grandparents' health outcomes during their Maryland stay. The adoption community celebrated the Johnson family as an example of how love transcends traditional boundaries and how intergenerational families can create extraordinary strength and advocacy. Sophia's story inspired other foster children to believe in the possibility of finding permanent families who would love and support them unconditionally. Educational institutions across the country began inviting Sophia to speak about advocacy, civil rights, and standing up for family. Her natural eloquence and systematic approach to justice made her a powerful spokesperson for multiple causes. The airline industry implemented Sophia-inspired training programs, with her confrontation of Amanda Lopez becoming required viewing for customer service staff. Her example demonstrated how powerful advocacy could emerge from unexpected sources when injustice was challenged with courage and articulate truth-telling. Corporate policies changed nationwide as other airlines scrambled to avoid similar viral incidents. The Johnson family's experience became a cautionary tale for any company that failed to address systematic bias in their customer service practices. But perhaps the most important impact was on other families facing discrimination. Sophia's example showed that age doesn't determine advocacy ability, that family love can overcome systematic oppression, and that one person's courage can inspire community solidarity and corporate accountability. The flight landed in Maryland, with the Johnson family's dignity not only restored, but elevated. They had transformed a potential trauma into a triumph of justice, education, and family love that would inspire millions of people worldwide. Sophia Johnson, at just 14 years old, had proven that when you combine excellent education, family love, moral courage, and systematic thinking, you can change the world one confrontation with injustice at a time. Her grandparents' legacy of civil rights advocacy had found its next generation champion, and the world was a more just place because of her unwavering determination to defend the people she loved most. The story that began with racist humiliation ended with transformative justice, proving that love, education, and courage remain the most powerful forces for social change in our society. Grandparents, how do you think her story will inspire other young people to stand up for justice? 5 years have passed since Flight 892 became a catalyst for transformation. Yet, the reverberations of Sophia Johnson's courageous stand continue to reshape lives, policies, and perspectives across the nation. What began as one family's medical journey evolved into a testament to the enduring power of love, dignity, and unwavering advocacy. Sophia, now 19, has become a beacon of hope for countless young advocates. Her systematic approach to justice, learned at the feet of civil rights pioneers, has inspired a new generation of student activists who understand that eloquence and evidence can triumph over prejudice and power. She serves as youth ambassador for the National Adoption Foundation, speaking at conferences where her story illuminates the transformative potential of intergenerational families built on choice rather than chance. The debate team at Atlanta Central High School has adopted the Johnson method, Sophia's technique of combining emotional truth with systematic documentation as their cornerstone strategy. Young debaters across the country now study her airline confrontation as a masterclass in advocacy under pressure, learning how moral courage can manifest through articulate truth-telling. Robert's neurological journey, while challenging, has been managed with dignity and grace. The specialized treatment protocol developed at Johns Hopkins Hospital has slowed his cognitive decline significantly, allowing him precious additional years of clarity and connection with his beloved family. His condition has become a case study in patient-centered care, with Sophia's advocacy role highlighted in medical ethics curricula nationwide. Margaret's diabetes management has stabilized through the coordinated care that Sophia helped navigate during their Maryland consultations. More importantly, the stress reduction from having such a capable family advocate has actually improved both grandparents' overall health outcomes, demonstrating the healing power of unconditional love and fierce protection. The Johnson incident catalyzed federal transportation reform that extends far beyond airline policy. The Dignity in Transit Act now mandates comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all transportation workers, establishes independent oversight committees for bias complaints, and creates legal protections for elderly and disabled travelers. Sophia's confrontation with systemic prejudice became the foundation for legislation that protects millions of vulnerable passengers. Congressional hearings featured the Johnson family's testimony, with Sophia's articulate presentation moving seasoned legislators to tears and action. Her systematic documentation of discriminatory behavior became the template for evidence standards in civil rights cases, proving that truth presented with courage can reshape legal frameworks. American Airlines' comprehensive policy overhaul has become the industry standard for addressing unconscious bias and discrimination. The Johnson protocols now guide customer service interactions across all major carriers, with Sophia's confrontation of Amanda Lopez serving as mandatory training footage for new employees. Her example demonstrates how one moment of moral courage can transform entire corporate cultures. The airline industry's voluntary adoption of enhanced sensitivity training has reduced discrimination complaints by over 60% nationwide. Sophia's influence extends beyond policy into practice, creating measurable improvements in passenger experience for elderly, disabled, and minority travelers who previously faced systematic bias. The Johnson family's success story has inspired a renaissance in older child adoptions, with families across the country recognizing that love knows no age boundaries. Adoption agencies report increased interest in intergenerational placements, with prospective parents citing Sophia's transformation as evidence of the extraordinary potential within every waiting child. Foster care reform initiatives now emphasize the Johnson model of patient educational advocacy combined with unconditional love. Sophia regularly visits group homes and foster families, sharing her journey from troubled child to confident advocate, proving that trauma can be transformed into triumph through family dedication and community support. Sophia's story has transcended its origins to become a cultural touchstone for anyone facing discrimination or standing up for family. Social media continues amplifying her message with "Checks Defend Your Family" and "Totros Advocacy Matters," inspiring millions of shares and testimonials from people who found courage in her example. Documentary filmmakers, authors, and artists have drawn inspiration from the Johnson family's triumph over systematic oppression. Their story appears in textbooks, training programs, and motivational curricula as proof that one person's moral courage can create waves of positive change that extend far beyond the initial moment of confrontation. As Sophia prepares for college with full scholarships from multiple institutions, recognizing her advocacy potential, she carries forward the lessons learned from her adoptive grandparents about dignity, education, and the power of truth-telling. Her planned double major in civil rights, law, and social work reflects a commitment to continuing the family legacy of fighting injustice through systematic advocacy and compassionate service. Robert and Margaret, now in their late 70s, watch with pride as their adopted granddaughter prepares to carry their torch into the next generation. If this incredible story of family love and courage inspired you, please subscribe and share it with others who need to see how one young advocate can change everything. Tell me in the comments, what's your biggest takeaway from Sophia's incredible defense of her grandparents? How do you think her story will inspire other young people to stand up for justice?